Live. Welcome back, guys, to another epic video. This is the first day back since my Canada trip. Well, not the first day back. It's been like 8 days because I pre-recorded everything for Canada, and so in Canada I recorded 8 days worth, and I started posting it once I got back. So I got back last Sunday, and so they're doing okay. They're getting about the same amount of views as normal. It's pretty cool. I hope everyone's really enjoying those scenic backgrounds. But now I'm back to my room again, and it was just kind of nice being able to take a 8-day break from recording any videos at all. So last time I started out in Mark. I read chapters 1 through 4. And so now I'll be reading chapter 5 through 8 of Mark today. And so I hope you stick with me. If you were watching this for like New Year's resolution or any stuff like that, I really hope I've come in handy just helping you read through the Bible or for any reason. Thank you so much for joining me so far. I've already gone long enough without starting reading the Bible, so let's get started. Chapter 5. Demons driven out by Jesus. They came to the other side of the sea, to the region of the Gerasenes. As soon as he got out of the boat, a man with an unclean spirit came out of the tombs and met him. He lived in the tombs, and no one was able to restrain him anymore, not even a chain, because he had often been bound with shackles and chains, but had torn the chains apart and smashed shackles. No one was strong enough to subdue him. 9 days among the tombs on the mountains, he was always crying out and cutting himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and knelt down before him. He cried out with a loud voice, "What do you have with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, for God, don't torment me." For he had told him, Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." "What is your name?" he asked him. "My name is Legion," he answered him, "because we are many." And he begged him earnestly not to send him out of the region. A large herd of pigs was there, feeding on the hillside. The demons begged him, "Send us to a pig so we may enter them." He gave them permission, and the unclean spirits came out and entered the pigs, and the herd of about 2,000 rushed down from the steep bank into the sea and drowned there. The men who tended them ran off and reported it in the town and the countryside, and people wanted to see what happened. They came to Jesus and saw a man who had been demon-possessed sitting there dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it described what had happened to the demon-possessed man and told them about the pigs. They began to beg him to leave the region. As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged him earnestly that night remain with them. Jesus did not let him, but told him, "Go home to your own people and report to them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." So he went out and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and they were all amazed. The girl restored, and the women were healed. When Jesus had crossed over again to the boat on the other side, a large crowd gathered around him while he was in the sea. One of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet, and he begged him earnestly, My little daughter is dying. Come, lay your hands on her so that she can get well and live." So Jesus went with him, and a large crowd was falling and pressing against him. Now a woman suffering from bleeding for 12 years had endured much and named doctors. She had spent everything she could and was not healed at all. On the contrary, she had become worse. Having heard about Jesus, she came up behind the crowd, touched his clothing. First she said, "If I can just touch his clothes, I'll be made well." Instantly, her flow of blood ceased, and she sensed in her body that she was healed of her affliction. At once, Jesus realized in himself that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and saw who had touched my clothes, and said, "Who has touched my clothes?" His disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing against you, and you say, 'Who touched me?'" But he looked around to see who had done this. The woman, with fear and trembling, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the truth. "Daughter," he said to her, "your faith has saved you. Go in peace and be healed from your affliction." While still speaking, people from the synagogue's leader's house said, "Your daughter is dead. Why bother the teacher anymore?" Jesus overheard what was said. He told the synagogue leaders, "Don't be afraid, only believe." He did not let anyone come near him except Peter, James, and John, James' brother. They came to the leader's house and saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, "Why are you making commotion and weeping? The child is not dead but asleep." They laughed at him, but he put them all outside. He took the child's father and mother and those who were with him, and he entered the place where the child was. Then he took the child by the hand and said to her, "Talitha cum," which is translated, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." Immediately, the girl got up and began to walk. She was 12 years old. At this, they were utterly astounded, and he gave them strict orders that no one should know about this, and told them not to give. And he told them to give her something to eat. Chapter 6: Rejection at Nazareth. He left there and came to his hometown, and his disciples followed him. When the Sabbath came, he began to teach at the synagogue, and many who heard him were astonished. "Where did this man get these things?" they said to him. "What is this wisdom that has been given to him, and how are his miracles performed by his hands? Isn't this the carpenter, the son of Mary, and the brother of James, Judas, and Simon? And aren't his sisters here with us?" So they were offended by him. Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor except in his hometown, among his relatives and his household. He is not able to do a miracle there, except that he had laid his hands on a few sick people and healed them." He was amazed over their unbelief. He was going around these villages teaching, commissioning 12. He summoned the 12 and began to send them out in pairs and give them authority over unclean spirits. He instructed them to take nothing for the road except a staff, no bread or traveling bag, no money in their belts, but to wear sandals and not put on an extra shirt. He says to them, "Whenever you enter a house, stay there until you leave that place. If any place does not welcome you or listen to you, when you leave there, shake the dust off your feet as a testimony against them." So they went out and preached, and people should repent. They drove out many demons, anointed many sick people with oil, and healed them. John the Baptist beheaded. King Herod heard about this because Jesus' name had become well known. Some said John the Baptist has been raised from the dead, and that's why miraculous powers are in work of him. Others said he is Elijah still. Others said he's a prophet like the prophets long ago. And Herod heard this. He said, "John, the one I beheaded, has been raised." For Herod himself had given orders to arrest John and chain him in prison on account of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, because he had married her. John had been telling Herod, "It is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife." So Herodias held a grudge against him. He wanted to kill him, but she could not, because Herod feared John and protected him, knowing he was righteous and holy man. Herod heard him, he would be very perplexed, and yet he liked to listen to him. The opportunity time came on his birthday when Herod gave a banquet to his nobles, military commanders, and believing men in Galilee. Herodias' own daughter came in and danced. She pleased Herod and his guests. The king said to the girl, "Ask me whatever you want, and I'll give it to you." He promised her with an oath, "Whatever you ask me, I'll give it to you, up to half my kingdom." So she went out and said to her mother, "What should I ask for?" "John the Baptist's head," she said. At once she hurried back to the king and said, "I want you to give me John the Baptist's head on a platter immediately." Although the king was deeply distressed because of this oath and the guests did not want to refuse her, the king immediately sent for an executioner and commanded him to bring John's head. So he went down and beheaded him in the prison, brought his head on a platter, and gave it to the girl. The girl said to her mother, when John's disciples heard about this, they came and removed his corpse and placed it in a tomb. Feeding the 5,000. The apostles gathered around Jesus and reported it to all that they had done and taught. He said to them, "Come away by yourselves for a remote place and rest for a while." For many people were coming and going, but they did not even have time to eat. So they went away in a boat and themselves to a remote place. But many saw them leaving and recognized them, and they ran on foot from all towns and arrived ahead of them. When he went ashore, he saw a large crowd and had compassion on them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he began to teach them many things. And when it grew late, his disciples approached him and said, "This place is deserted. It's already late. Send them away so that they can go in the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat." "You give them something to eat," he responded. They said to him, "Should we go off and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give them something to eat?" He asked them, "How many loaves do you have? Go and see." When they found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. They instructed them to have all the people sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of 150s. He took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he blessed it and broke the loaves. He kept giving them to his disciples and set before the people. He also divided 2 fish among them all. Everyone ate and was satisfied. They picked up the 12 baskets full of pieces of bread and fish. Now those who had eaten the loaves were 5,000 men, walking on water. Immediately he had made his disciples get into a boat and go ahead of him on the other side of Bethsaida, while he dismissed the crowd. After he said goodbye to them, he went away to the mountain to pray. While in the middle of the night, the boat was in the middle of the sea, he was alone on land. He saw them straining their oars because the wind was against them. Very early in the morning, he came toward them walking on the sea and wanted to pass by them. When they saw him walking on the sea, they thought it was a ghost and cried out. Because they all saw him and were terrified. Immediately he spoke with them and said, "Have courage, it is I, don't be afraid." When they got on the boat, and the wind ceased, and they were completely stunned, because they had not understood about the loaves. Instead, their hearts were hardened. Miraculous healing. When they had crossed over, they came to the shore at Gennesaret and anchored there. As they got out of the boat, people immediately recognized them. They heard throughout that region began carrying the sick on mats to wherever they heard he was. Wherever he went to villages, towns, or in the country. They lay sick in marketplaces and begged him they might touch just the end of his robe, and everyone who touched it was healed. I'm halfway through now, chapter 7. Traditions of the elders. The Pharisees, some of the scribes who come from Jerusalem, gathered around him. They observed that some of his disciples were eating bread with unclean, that is, unwashed hands. For Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they get their hands ceremonially washed and keep the tradition of the elders. When they come from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they have washed. And there are many other customs they have received and keep, like the washing cups, pitchers, kettles, dining couches. So Pharisees and all the scribes asked him, "Why don't your disciples do according to the tradition of the elders, instead of eating bread with ceremonially unclean hands?" He answered them, "Isaiah prophesied correctly about you hypocrites, as it is written, 'This people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. They worship me in vain, teaching as doctrines human commands.'" Abandoning the command of God, he hold on to human tradition. He also said to them, "You have a fine way of invalidating God's command in order to set up your tradition. For Moses said, 'Honor your father and your mother, and whoever speaks evil of father or mother must be put to death.' But if you say, 'If anyone tells his father or mother, whatever benefits you might have received from me is Corban, that is an offering devoted to God,' you must no longer do anything that his father or mother know by the word by God's tradition that you have handed him, and you do many other similar things." Summoning the crowd again, he told them, "Listen to me, all of you, and understand. Nothing that goes into a person from outside can defile him, but the things that come out of a person are what defile him." When he went into the house away from the crowd, disciples asked him about the parable. He said to them, Are you also as lacking understanding?" Then he realized that nothing can go into a person from the outside can defile him, for it doesn't go into his heart, but into the stomach and is eliminated. Thus he declared all the foods clean. He said, "What comes out of a person is what defiles him. For from within, out of all people's hearts, comes evil thoughts, sexual immoralities, theft, murder, adultery, greed, evil actions, deceit, indulgence, envy, slander, pride, and foolishness. All these evil things come from within to defile a person." A gentle mother's faith. He got up and departed from there to the region of Tyre. He entered a house and not want anyone to know, but he could not escape notice. Instead, immediately after hearing about him, a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Gentile, a Syrophoenician by birth, and she was asking him to cast demon out of her daughter. He said to her, "Let the children eat first. It isn't right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." She replied to him, "Lord, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." And he told her, as all this replied, "Then you may go. The demons left your daughter." When she went back home, she found the child lying in the bed, and the demon was gone. Jesus does everything well. Again, leaving the region entire, he went by city into the Sea of Galilee through the region, the Decapolis. They brought him a deaf man who had difficulty speaking, and begged Jesus to lay his hand on him. So he took away the crowd in private. After putting his fingers in the man's ears and spitting, he touched his tongue. Looking up to heaven, he sighed deeply and said to him, Epha, Ephatha, that is, be opened. Immediately his ears were opened, his tongue was loosened, and he began to speak clearly. He ordered them not to tell no one, but the more he ordered it, the more they proclaimed it. They were extremely astonished and said, He has done everything well. He even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak. Chapter 8. Feeding 4,000. In those days there was again a large crowd, and they had nothing to eat. He called his disciples and said to them, I have compassion on the crowd, because they have already stayed with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. If I send them home hungry, they'll collapse in the way, and some of them will have a long distance. Disciples answered him, Where can anyone get enough bread for the people right here in this desolate place to feed these people? How many loaves do you have? He asked them. 7, they said to him. He commanded the crowd to sit down on the ground. Taking 7 loaves, he gave thanks, broke them, and gave them to his disciples to the people. So they stirred in the crowd. They also had a few small fish. After he blessed them, he said, these were served well as well. They ate and were satisfied, and they collected 7 large baskets of leftover pieces. About 4,000 were there. He dismissed them, and he immediately got up into the boat with his disciples, and they went into the district of Dalmanutha. 11 of the Pharisees and Herod. The Pharisees came and began to argue with him, demanding of him a sign from heaven to test him. Sighing deeply in his spirit, he said, Why does this generation demand a sign? Truly I tell you, no sign will be given to this generation. Then he left them, got back into the boat, and went to the other side. Disciples had forgotten to take bread, and only 1 loaf with them in the boat. Then he gave strict orders. Watch out, beware of the 11, the Pharisees and the 11 of Herod. They're discussing among themselves that they not have any bread. What are this? He said to them. Why are you discussing the fact that you know bread? Do you understand or comprehend? Do you have hardened hearts? Do you have eyes not see? Do you have ears not hear? And do you not remember? When I broke the 5 loaves for 5,000, how many baskets full of leftovers did you collect? 12, they tell him. I broke the 7 loaves for 4,000, how many baskets full of pieces do you collect? 7, to him. And he said to them, Don't you understand yet? Healing a blind man. They came to Bethsaida and brought him a blind man, begged him to touch him. He took the blind man's hand and brought him out to the village, spitting on his eyes and laying his hand on him. He asked him, Do you see anything? He looked up and said, I see people. They look like trees walking. Again, Jesus placed his hand on the man's eyes. The man looked intensely, and his sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. Then he sent him home, saying, Don't even go into the village. Peter's confession of the Messiah. Jesus went out with his disciples to the village of Caesarea Philippi. On the road that he asked his disciples, Who do people say that I am? They answered him, John the Baptist, others Elijah, but still others one of the prophets. But you, he asked them, Who do you say that I am? Peter answered him, You are the Messiah. And he strictly warned them not to tell no one. He warned them to tell no one about him. His death and resurrection predicted. And began to teach them that it was necessary for a Son of Man to suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, chief priests, and scribes, and be killed and rise after 3 days. He spoke openly about this. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But turning around, looking at his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, Get behind me, Satan. You're not thinking about God's concerns, but human concerns. Take up your cross. Calling to the crowd along with his disciples, he said to them, If anyone wants to follow after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it. Whoever wants his life to me, and the gospel will save it. For what does it benefit someone to gain the whole world yet lose his life? What can anyone give in exchange for his life? For whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will also be ashamed of him when he comes in glory with his Father and the holy angels. Here it is. That's all the reading for today. I actually find it super interesting how people a lot of times will say, Don't tell no one. Just think about that for a little bit. Don't tell no one. Doesn't that mean tell someone? Jesus said, "Tell no one." I just heard it wrong, but "Don't tell no one" doesn't make sense to me, and stuff like that. The English language just really confuses me, or like the words "same difference," stuff like that. I don't understand. But no matter what, I hope you've had a great day so far. Have a great day. Thank you so much for sticking along with me. Remember, God loves you, and goodbye.